covered with an AI meeting assistant to take notes and capture action items, so Jerry can go camping.
Name running on his father's legacy, but he's also his biggest donor is also Trump's biggest donor as well. So the idea of who he's in the race or sort of take votes away from, I think it's pretty clear based on who's funding his campaign.
So you think the interesting thing is a lot of the stuff he's saying is more conservative. So I'm not sure that's going to work the way they want to get by.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think if you look at the polling, he takes a little bit more from Biden, maybe 60%, but he does take away from Trump, too. And I think if you're Democrats, you've got a whole campaign arm looking at trying to make those numbers affect Trump much more.
Eliana, best shot.
Columbia University President Minouche Shafik will testify next week on Wednesday on Capitol Hill. My prediction is she will not sit there and hem and haw about whether calling for the genocide of Jews constitutes harassment on her campus, but I do suspect she will manage to step in it in a different way.
Which is?
Remains to be seen. Okay?
Well, it's easy. It's certainly easier to not make the same mistake.
Yes. My prediction is she will not make the same mistake, but I think she will make a different mistake given what has transpired on that campus.
Lulu, bring us home.
I am focused on something that the Biden administration did this week, which was the expansion of background checks on gun sales, especially when we're talking about the loopholes, gun shows, and people selling guns out of their garages and backyards. I mean, 40% of illegal activity with guns can be traced to unregulated gun sales in this country. And so when we're talking about crime, which we often are in an election season, we are rarely talking about how these illegal gun sales
but here's the question I have about this. I mean, we've been talking about the gun show loophole for decades, and people say, well, you got to pass legislation. They don't pass legislation. Do you think that the Biden administration has come up with some magic solution that nobody else thought of? Or do you think that they're just campaign issue?
Welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Christiana Manpour in New York this week. It is an uneasy time here in the United States as the fate of the country and, in fact, much of the world hangs to a great extent in the balance, just months away from yet another Biden-Trump matchup. President Biden hopes that his strong commitment to democracy and his record on the economy, climate, and women's rights will win out. And he hopes to overcome dissent in his own party that's mounting over the war in Gaza. Every week, more and more Democrats are expressing frustration with American policy. Some heavyweights, including former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, are now even joining the call for the U.S. to stop arms transfers to Israel. And of course, protesters continue to mount what is really a growing peace movement. Senator Bernie Sanders has been one of the loudest voices on this issue. At 82 years old, he manages to be the voice of young liberals and many others. And he warns that if Biden doesn't change tack on the Israel war and doesn't expand his economic policy for working families at home, he could lose in November. Senator Sanders joined me from Washington. Welcome back to our program, Senator. So we've laid out your criticisms of the current military operation. What is he doing, the president, what do you want him to do that he hasn't done up until now?
Christian, we are looking right now in Gaza at one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the modern history of the world. Hundreds of thousands of people face starvation. Children are dying from malnutrition. 80% of the population has been displaced. Over half the buildings have been damaged or destroyed. And Israel continues to make it difficult to get the kind of humanitarian aid that desperate people need. So to my mind, the most important thing the United States government can do is say to Mr. Netanyahu, you know what? You cannot continue this disastrous, horrific war. You cannot allow children by the thousands to face starvation, or you're not getting another nickel. Now, I think one of the incongruities that a lot of people in America see is everybody is criticizing Netanyahu, and then they're saying in the next word, oh, here, Mr. Netanyahu, here's another $14 billion on top of the $3.5 billion you got. You're a terrible guy. You're doing terrible things, but here's your money. I think our policy has got to be very clear. Not another nickel for Netanyahu's right-wing extremist government while hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza face starvation, period.
And Senator, I want to know what you think about the election coming up in this country that President Biden is rerunning with former President Trump. Do you believe, given what's happened in some of the primaries, the protest vote, that this war will hurt President Biden at the polls in November?
Yes, I do. The choice is very, very clear. I think Trump will be a disaster if elected for this country, a very dangerous person who is undermining American democracy every day. But to answer your question, I think in terms of how young people, how people of color feel about the president, this is being negatively impacted by the support for Israel that he has shown. I think that's got to change. And we are doing our best to try to get that to change.
So, you've mentioned President Trump. He, as you know, seems to be caught between his own rock and his own hard place about abortion. Now, he started the backlash, having nominated very, very conservative judges who rolled back Roe versus Wade. And now he's saying that the latest decision by the courts, which presumably are independent, in Arizona, that go back 160 years in terms of abortion rights or no abortion rights, he says that's a mistake and we're going to straighten it out.
Yeah.
What is your comment on that?
Christian, the difficulty we have in trying to respond to Trump, and I say this in a sense with all due respect, he's a pathological liar. So what he says today is not what he will say tomorrow. He will lie about virtually everything. Trump boasts, that he appointed 3 right-wing Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade. I think he is catching on to the reality that that is backfiring within the general population. The American people do not want to go back 50 years. Women of this country have fought to be able to control their own body, fought for women's rights, and overwhelmingly, not only virtually all Democrats, but many Republicans are saying this is absurd to take away basic rights that women have won.
As we all know, President Biden was the first sitting president to go to a picket line, the UAW. His former chief of staff is saying, though, that instead of his campaign looking back and trying to, boast or whatever, get credit for their things that they've done already, they've got to look forward and look at the economy going forward. Do you agree with that?
100%. Look, Biden has the right to take credit for a number of important initiatives, and he should be proud of what he's accomplished. But at the end of the day, in America today, and this has been the case for a long, long time, you got a working class which is really hurting. 60% of our people living paycheck to paycheck. You got people all over America who cannot afford the rising costs of housing. You have a healthcare system which is broken and dysfunctional. We pay twice as much per capita for healthcare as people of any other country, and yet 85 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured. Our child care system is a disaster. People don't have pensions. So we have enormous problems. Bottom line is, you got a country and an economy today that is working really, really, really good for billionaires and the 1%, not working for the middle class or the working class of this country. And the president understands that. But I think he's got to get out in front and say, look, this is my agenda. We're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage. We're going to make it easier for workers to support unions. We're going to do away with student debt. And he's making some progress on that. But you need an agenda that speaks to the pain of working families who too often have felt neglected, which is why Trump is gaining support from them.
Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up later on the show, when America waged peace, my conversation from the archives with Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and Bertie Ahern in Northern Ireland. But first, the incredible journey of Yusef Salaam, falsely convicted at 15, from the Central Park Five to New York City councilman.
We were hoping that a person who became the future president of these United States would equally say, you know what, I took out a full-page ad in 1989 calling for your death. I'm sorry.
The 2024 SoFi NBA Play-In Tournament on TNT. Before these teams make it to the playoffs, they got to win to get in.
How about the drama of this play-in game?
The 2024 SoFi NBA Play-In Tournament begins Tuesday at 7:30 on TNT.
You should Angie that.
Angie what?
Angie that. It means comparing custom quotes from skilled service professionals or booking at an upfront price so you can find the best price for you. Get started today at Angie.com.
We all know what it's like to worry, to not know where our dog is gone. Say goodbye to that with Tractive. Follow every step and find your dog in no time. Set virtual fences, monitor their activity, sleep, and get health alerts all in one easy-to-use app with unlimited range and support in over 150 countries. Tractive, the GPS tracker trusted by pet parents worldwide. Save 20% for a limited time.
Cause you're free to do what you want to do. Do what you want, do what you want to do.
At UFOS, we don't make footwear. We make shock absorbers, fatigue fighters, mobility maximizers. This is the science of active recovery. Revolutionary UFOM technology absorbs impact and reduces pressure. It's the